Tonight on Primetime Politics, mourning a lost colleague.
Our colleague Jim Carr just passed away.
Members from parties observe a minute of silence and share tributes for the late Jim Carr. A politician and cabinet minister remembered for his decency and his dedication to public service.
He's like my parliamentary dad.
Somebody that, despite our partisan differences, I've always considered a friend.
He really represented decency in this place.
Also, a mission to Haiti. We speak to Bob Ray, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, about his fact-finding mission to the Caribbean country. Is there a role for Canada as Haiti deals with both an economic and a humanitarian crisis? This is Primetime Politics. Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. The House of Commons adjourned this afternoon, suspending the day's business upon hearing the news of Jim Carr's death. A member of Justin Trudeau's cabinet, Carr is being remembered tonight for more than his sense of public service, but also for his decency and for the way he dealt with all parliamentarians regardless of position or party. Here now is the Prime Minister.
It is with enormous sadness that we heard of the passing of Jim Carr this morning. I knew he'd been sick for a while, but you can't be ready for these kinds of moments. Jim was an extraordinary man. He was incredibly thoughtful and incredibly passionate about this country, about his region, about the community, dedicated to service, dedicated to a better future for all Canadians. He was extremely pleased to be able to get his Green Prairie Economy Bill through the House just last week. He was committed to every corner of this country, contributing to a better future for everyone, and he will be missed as a colleague, he will be missed as a leader, but mostly I'm going to miss him as a friend. His legacy will be one of service, one of thoughtful leadership, one of deep and abiding passion for this country and for its people, along with a real commitment to thoughtful solutions that bring people together. He will be forever missed. Merci tout le monde.
Obviously a difficult time, as you knew Jim, perhaps better than most MPs on the Hill, given the fact that you both represent Winnipeg.
Well, in our ridings, we're adjacent to one another, but we've been friends and colleagues for 35 years, and throughout Jim's varied career, because he was a true Renaissance man, a musician, professional musician, a journalist, a business leader, and of course a parliamentary colleague, both an MP and an MLA, and he really made his mark in Manitoba, but also on the entire country. We've lost just such a valued member of the parliamentary family, but for those of us in Manitoba, we've lost a dear friend and a colleague, and he will be dearly missed.
Now, he was diagnosed with myeloma and kidney disease about 3 years ago, and I think there was obviously a lot of concern at the time, but I think people were also under the impression that he had gotten through the worst of the disease. Did the news this morning surprise you?
He's been ill for quite some time, and it certainly was evident to us who've known him for a long time. He was a person full of life, full of vigor, and he certainly slowed down towards the end of his life. But let me tell you, he gave it his all for his private member's bill, building a Green Prairie economy. I was by his side when he gave his final remarks and when it passed the House on third reading. And such courage, such passion for the place that we come from, the prairies, a passionate Canadian, but even more importantly, a passionate prairie advocate.
You know, people keep noting the greening of the prairie economy, the bill that to the end he was fighting for, his last great political achievement, really. I think perhaps as a tribute, talk to us about that bill. What did he hope would come of it? What was eventually passed?
Well, it's a framework for growing the economy while also keeping the environment in mind. We know, and he would certainly say, the environment and the economy go hand in hand. And so we know that we are in transition on the prairies. He wanted to make sure that our workers, our farmers, our business people are at the center of the discussion. We can grow our prairie economy. We can meet our energy needs. We can meet our agricultural needs. And we can do that sustainably. And that really was his message up until his final speech. And I know that those of us who he leaves behind, we will put our shoulder to the wheel, and we will ensure that that vision that he promoted comes true. We will work hard on that in his memory.
First, your reaction to the news today that Jim Carr passed earlier this morning.
Well, even though we all knew that Jim's been ill for quite some time, it was still a shock. We all thought we'd see him back here. We were expecting that he'd be around for a while, and to have him pass so quickly after just seeing him last week was devastating, to say the least, to everyone in the House. Jim was a well-liked individual, one of the nicest men I've ever had the pleasure of working with, and I've known him since he was an MLA. I first got to know him back in around 1989. And I can tell you that, you know, he's always had an open-door policy. At that time, I was a representative for the cattle industry, and even after he got elected and became Minister of Natural Resources here federally, whenever I wanted to have a meeting with him as Manitoba's leading minister, he always had a door and a coffee, and we could always have a chat. So somebody that I respected, not always agreed with, but a gentleman at all times. And so I extend my condolences to Colleen and the entire family, and of course the bigger Liberal family in Manitoba and across the country, because we lost a real champion of democracy and someone who always fought for Manitoba and the prairies.
In terms of crossing over the floor, being able to have friendships, to be able to speak to a colleague such as you who are not part of the same party, talk to us about the tone that he set and the example that he leaves behind for others.
Well, I think he's always been able to prove, you know, and I think it comes down to his experience as president of Manitoba Business Council, of being able to work with all different parties and all different sectors, and being able to bring everybody around a common goal of making things better. And so, you know, Jim definitely tried to do that. And definitely he ran into opposition here in Ottawa, especially from us as Conservatives and some of his initiatives. But I can tell you that because he was always approachable, because he preached everybody with respect, and we always wanted to reciprocate that. And you know, I was able to develop a friendship based on that. And when we would fly back and forth from Winnipeg to Ottawa, you know, we'd sit there and we'd talk about our family. And like he was telling me, we're sat together for Truth and Reconciliation Day in Winnipeg, and how his son Ben was helping him out, and how he decided to grow the beard, and Ben was helping him keep it looking good by trimming it up for him every week. So, you know, we would have those personal stories as well. And so here's a gentleman that's going to be sadly missed by all, but fondly remembered.
I first want to begin with your reaction to the news of Jim Carr's passing.
Well, of course, it was a big shock. I mean, he has been suffering from medical issues for some time, and we knew that was serious. But he was last week he was so upbeat and proud of what he'd accomplished with his private member's bill on building a green economy in the prairies, and he just looked really good. And I had a couple of conversations with him, and so to hear this news today was a surprise and a shock, and a very sad day for all of us.
So in all those conversations, he never let on how he was feeling in that moment?
He said his cancer was still there and would be there for months, but and would eventually, be his end, I guess. But he felt that he had some time to do the work that he was very proud of doing here. He was such a, and I know other people have said this, but he was such a respectful colleague here in the House to everybody that I always admired that in him. I was the natural resources critic when he was natural resources minister, and we traveled quite a bit together, and he always included me in his briefing meetings. He would introduce me in conferences as his friendly critic, and we didn't always agree, but he was so he was a real gentleman and someone that I really admired and was so glad to have in this place, which can get rancorous at times. He was never that way. Always brought people in. I remember at the Generation Energy meeting that he organized in Winnipeg, people from all over the world. He invited many of them to his house one night for a party. It turned out to be his birthday party, and that's the kind of guy he was. He wanted to be that person that brought people together.
Obviously, it leaves many with these wonderful memories of Jim Carr, but I'm wondering what type of gap that leaves behind in the House of Commons when someone who's just so respected for being able to be so decent and to cross party lines and to treat people respectfully, as to your point, you being his critic, he includes you in the meetings. What type of gap does that leave behind, do you think?
Well, I think in this age we need more respect, we need more work across party lines, and Jim just exemplified that to a T. And so losing Jim, is a loss, and hopefully we can, we will go on, obviously, and but it's just, he was a real example to everyone on how we could and should work here, and I know myself and others did see that in him and learn from that, and so I think his legacy will be that way of working, how we can work together.
Mm-hmm. The Dominican president is the latest person to be adding his voice for an international mission to Haiti. Since the assassination of the Haitian president Jovenel Moïse, the Caribbean country has descended to a new level of chaos. The country's economy is in a free fall as competing gangs vie for control of the capital and the country. Canada has been approached to lead an international effort in Haiti, and the UN ambassador Bob Ray did lead a team to Haiti late last week to see, at the very least, if the competing parties might come together to talk. Ambassador Bob Ray joins us right now. Ambassador, thank you for being here. There is a lot to discuss, but I was wondering if first you might share how you are feeling tonight and reacting to the news of Jim Carr's death.
Well, I knew Jim well over many, many years before he was in politics at the federal level. I've known him for years in Winnipeg. A wonderfully decent guy, very thoughtful, one of those people who cared about the country enormously, cared about his community. Great family guys, those kids and everything. It's a very sad moment. I also had a chance to speak to him quite a bit during his challenge with leukemia. I had a particularly aggressive and difficult treatment that he went through, which was very tough, but he saw it through with enormous courage and great determination. Right up until the very end, he was still going and insisting on carrying on. But there will be many other aspects of his legacy. Above all, he was a very decent guy, good-humored, extremely principled, but not stiff about anything. He was a delightful company. and he had many, many friends in all political parties. He was a remarkable, great guy.
Well, there will be many words shared in the many days. His family says that there will be a public memorial to be announced at some point soon. With that, Ambassador Ray, I do want to move on to Haiti now, because you have just led a diplomatic mission to that country, looking to see if parties involved would be willing to talk and find a way forward. Who did you meet with?
Well, I met with a number of different groups within what I would call broadly civil society. Parliament is not sitting and not there. There's been no elections for 7 years. There's a huge political vacuum, which is one of the great problems that's facing the country from a governance standpoint. So we basically met with as many people as we could from all sides of the spectrum. Obviously, I met with the interim prime minister, who was named to that job at the very end of what turned out to be the end of the life of the president who was assassinated. And Mr. Henry is determined to do what he promised the president he would do, which is to carry on as he needed to. But he's also willing to talk to others, and we've talked to many others. The Montana group, younger people, human rights advocates, the business community. We covered a wide range of people and groups. Our ambassador there, Sébastien Carrière, does a terrific job. And we were really building on his earlier conversations and seeing how we could encourage the parties to put a little bit of water in their wine and try to move towards a transition that would then allow for the holding of an election, provided, of course, the other provision has to be dealing with the security situation. So there are a number of things that have to come together, and we're still working on that. I would say I didn't see any breakthroughs, but I did think that people are beginning to get the message more and more, because it's being delivered by a number of people who are very concerned that the Haitian political leadership has to put the worst kinds of partisanship aside, and obviously has to put corruption aside, and has to deal directly with each other and saying we've got to create stability and we've got to move to an election.
Now, the Haitian government, to my understanding, has asked for military intervention to deal with what you're talking about, the gangs that are right now running much of the country. What do you make of that proposal? Is that something that we might see down the pipes?
I think it's going to take it's certainly going to take a real strategic conversation, a precise conversation about where we find a consensus in Haitian society. I would say that nobody that I talked to, including at this point the Prime Minister, when we encouraged a more detailed conversation of what anybody would have in mind in that sense, is nobody wants thousands of troops from anywhere else. We've done that twice now. We've had major interventions in the past. They have not left a lasting solution, and so why anybody would go back to that well a third time is beyond me. What we have to figure out is how can we assist Haitian society and the civil authority in Haiti to carry out the measures that are going to be required to take the power away from the gangs. Sanctions was part of it, and our sanctions approach received a huge vote of approval from everybody that we talked to. Mm-hmm. A lot of support for those sanctions. We've also increased our humanitarian assistance, our assistance on the cholera epidemic. We've put all that in there, and now we're working particularly on the security situation and on what a transition could look like, but we're not imposing the transition. That transition has to be decided by the Haitian people themselves. Canada has no favorite candidate for any political office in Haiti. We have no other agenda than to allow the Haitian people to govern themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's all we're doing.
Quickly running out of time here, Ambassador, but I do want to ask you, because there are Canadians, as soon as Antony Blinken was in Ottawa talking about Canada taking a lead with doing some type of exploration in Haiti, there are those that have expressed questions as to why Canada should be involved. And perhaps a better way to put that is, what is the fear if the international community does not get involved with Haiti?
Well, I think having a country dive into complete chaos is bad for the people. We have a duty to assist countries that are in this condition, and the consequences of not doing it are that things just go from bad to worse, and that means that the threat that of the security threat or the issue of civil chaos spreads elsewhere. The fact that people won't stay, people will go elsewhere. Certainly the neighboring country, the Dominican Republic, has been making it clear that this level of insecurity in their neighborhood is not something they can easily live with. And we have to understand that this is not a country that's far, far away. It's a few hundred miles off the Florida coast. We all need to think about how we can help and how we can provide the kind of assistance that will lead to a better future. We're also deeply involved in the Haitian community coming to Canada. We have huge diaspora in our country. We have large ones in the United States and elsewhere. There are no little foreign problems anymore. These are all very close to us, and we have to make them our own and figure out how to provide constructive ideas in providing a response to what is a critical situation.
Ambassador Ray, always appreciate the time. Thank you for this. Well, political watchers are keeping a very keen eye on the Ontario riding of Mississauga Lakeshore this evening. A by-election is being held there to replace outgoing Liberal Sven Spengeman. And there's a record number 40 candidates vying for the seat. Now, the most high profile includes Charles Sousa, a former Liberal Finance Minister of Ontario, Ron Chinzer, who is a police officer who is running for the Conservative Party, and Julia Cole, who has worked as a provincial constituency assistant who is running for the NDP. So to talk about the significance of this by-election, we're happy to have back on the program tonight Eric Grenier, political writer, polls analyst, and the mind behind the Writ. Eric, nice to see you.
Happy to be here.
Now, listen, I should put it out there that you and I are speaking right now before the results are actually released, just to put it out there because people might be seeing this online. But let's begin with significance here, and more specifically here, the significance of this by-election for the Conservative Party. This is the first by-election to be held since Pierre Poilievre won the Conservative leadership race. Just how important is a win tonight for the party?
Well, it's important because it will signify that Pierre Poilievre is able to win the kind of ridings that the Conservatives need to win in order to form a government. The last time the Conservatives won this part of the country was in the 2011 election when Stephen Harper formed a majority government. So it's the kind of riding that you would expect to see in a Conservative government. So I think that is why this is going to be a really important test for Pierre Poilievre. This is his first time that the Conservative Party under his leadership is going to go to the voters, and this is the kind of riding that, you know, it ranked 149th on the Conservative list in 2021 in terms of their margin of victory or defeat, and that's where you are if you're going to be, you know, forming a minority government, 149 seats, something like that for the Conservatives. So if they're not able to win this, or at least put up a good show, it does suggest that the Conservatives might have some work to do, that they haven't actually made that much progress since the last election.
Okay, so that is what's on the line for the Conservative Party. Let's talk about the Liberals now, because arguably that party has the highest profile candidate in Charles Sousa. What would a win or a loss in this by-election mean for the federal Liberals?
A win is what would be expected. This is a Liberal riding. It's been a Liberal riding since 2015. It stuck with the party in the last two elections when they won a minority government, and they have a good candidate in Charles Sousa, someone who has name recognition that none of the other candidates have. So if the Liberals are able to win this, it's what's really expected. And when you're a government that's been in power now for, you know, approaching 8 years, or its 8th year, there is always going to be some attrition. So if the Liberals are able to still hold on to this and more or less retain the same amount of the vote that they had in the last election, that would be a strong sign for them that, you know, they can keep going in this direction for a while. If they come up short, if we see that their vote comes down a lot, or that they lose the riding, then some serious questions are going to be asked that if the Liberals can't win this riding when they have a good candidate, what does that mean for the state of this government? So there is a lot at stake, and especially for the party that holds the seat. If you hold the seat, you're supposed to keep holding it.
Let's also talk about, as I said, the record number of candidates running in this by-election. There is, of course, the NDP, the People's Party candidate as well, dozens of others, though. How does that affect the final results? Who has most to lose with so many independents running?
That is an open question. This is a record for the number of candidates. There's 40. The previous record was 21. That was in the last federal election in St. Boniface, St. Vital in Manitoba. And this is a protest kind of thing where it's against the Liberals' decision to renege on their electoral reform promises. So it is a little bit of a prank. There's going to be a huge ballot. There's going to be a lot of names on that ballot, and people have to go through all of those independent candidates to find the actual candidate that they might want to vote for, if it's the Conservatives, the Liberals, New Democrats, whatever. That will be a bit of a challenge for voters, but will it have an actual impact? I'm not sure. I would think that most of the people who vote for independent candidates would have done so anyway. The fact that there's so many more choices isn't going to increase the number of people who will vote for those candidates. When we saw what happened in the St. Boniface riding, there wasn't a huge turnout for those independents. They all just split a very small amount of the vote. That's what I'm expecting to happen tonight, but I'll be curious to see if there'll be more spoiled ballots, for example, because if you have to choose from 40, I guess there's more of a chance that you might make a mistake.
Yeah, in fact, Elections Canada apparently has had to come out with a special ballot with 2 columns in order to accommodate everybody who's running. Listen, I'm also wondering about the provincial impact on this vote, because, you know, of course, Ontario, like all the provinces, are dealing with a healthcare crisis right now. Ontario, for its part, does have a surplus, but is not committed to more funding dollars for healthcare. Instead, they're asking for more money out of Ottawa, whose share funding is less than a third when it comes to healthcare. So what kind of bearing does the provincial picture have on a by-election like the one we're watching tonight?
I think it does have an impact on support for the Conservatives, because we saw this in the last few federal elections where the Conservatives were, you know, we don't know if they were correct or not, but blaming Doug Ford for some of their poor performances in the GTA. And we've already seen some indications of that they might already be trying to set up what could be disappointing results for them there. And since we do have in Ontario and federal politics that balancing act where voters tend to want a different government in Ottawa than they have in Toronto, that would play to the advantage of the Liberals here. So if there are people right now that are upset at the PC government, then voting against the Conservatives might be a way to express that. But Charles Sousa as well has some links with the Ontario Liberals, who are not exactly popular either. So, you know, it could have an impact going both ways.
Well, we are watching very closely. Eric, it was good to speak with you. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you.
And that's Eric Grenier of the Writ. And that is our program for tonight. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.